So on behalf of the Citizen Science Lab, welcome to this very first webinar. The people involved are down here on this slide. Maybe just as an introduction, this webinar, and probably also future webinars, will be in two parts. The first part will be a real webinar with a presentation, which will be streamed and recorded. And the second part, second half an hour thereabouts, will be interactive in breakout rooms. And this is why we are in regular Zoom and not in webinar mode. So welcome everybody on YouTube. The second half will be exclusively here on Zoom in breakout rooms. So everybody is already muted, I think. Thank you for that. That means also that none of your information whatsoever will make it into the recording. Please ask any questions you may have in Zoom or in the comments on YouTube. And as I said, the second part will be interactive here in breakout rooms in Zoom. So this will not be streamed or recorded. So just to give a little background on who we are and why we do this, this Citizen Science Lab comes from experience with several citizen science projects that we have been running from the University of Leiden. Like this one, this is me and my colleagues a couple of years ago, where we're trying to measure air pollution with smartphones in the ISPEX project, which started as a small idea here at the university, but quickly turned into a large-scale measurement campaign where several thousand people across the Netherlands participated in measurements. And we demonstrated that we could really add value with citizen science observations of air pollution with respect to the ground-based measurement network and satellites, as here on the right. So this is also where we started collaborating with Anna, my colleague here also in the webinar, to study how could this work, such a citizen science project. Some things we did right in ISPEX, some things we did completely wrong. And we learned from that, for instance, in this publication. But ISPEX went as far as being discussed in Dutch Parliament, in the Tweede Kamer, and really turn some things around. Later on, we had a European campaign, and right now we're developing the follow-up ISPEX 2.0 with add-ons that fit on all smartphones, much more enhanced accuracy for both air pollution measurements and water quality measurements. So this is one of the projects that kind of spurred the development of the Citizen Science Lab, because of that project, a lot of our scientific colleagues, but also many other inhabitants of the Netherlands asked us questions about how do we do this kind of citizen science. So this led us to the establishment of the Citizen Science Lab. We're here at Leiden University, but it's not just for scientists here at Leiden University. It's basically for everybody in Leiden and surroundings, the rest of the Netherlands, and everybody in the world who is interested in joining this. So this kind of sums up our vision of what we want to achieve. We really want to connect all areas of scientific and or societal research. And this research can take on many shapes and forms, and it's absolutely not exclusive to coming from the university. I think more importantly, we want to connect all stakeholders in all phases of this research project. So really co-create projects together with citizen scientists and other societal stakeholders. So no longer just projects that are coming from the university or just projects that grow up bottom up, but connect all these movements. So these are the roles that we see for ourselves in the lab, that we facilitate project development, but in the extreme form, we really want to incubate radical, innovative new forms of citizen science and coordinate those and collaborate with all relevant stakeholders. We already have our little ecosystem here, and we're trying to expand that. And the expansion is really focused on two things. In 2022, Leiden will be the European City of Science, and we want to make it also into the European City of Citizen Science with a large program in collaboration between the university and the rest of the city and the rest of the province and the rest of the country. And a lot of our topical focus is on the Sustainable Development Goals, but we'll have another webinar at some point going into depth of that. So this is very much a local small, relatively bottom-up initiative out of Leiden, the university and the municipality, collaborating with local partners. But with these webinars and other activities, we want to also connect and exchange expertise across the country, across Europe. We are the national hub for several European networks. And of course, this is a global enterprise in the end, for instance, connecting to the Sustainable Development Goals. So for today, the topic is characteristics of citizen science. Let's start at the fundamentals, and Margaret Gold, my colleague, will take over here.
Thank you, Frans. I'm going to share my desktop, and let's see if that's gone through now. Share. There. Hopefully you're now seeing it. So thank you so much for inviting me to join the very first webinar of the Citizen Science Lab. That's really quite exciting. You'll see in my background that I'm pretending to be at the Museum for Natuurkunde, where the European Citizen Science Association is based. This is our beautiful office building, and pretending to be behind me is the biodiversity wall at the museum. In fact, I'm actually physically based in Leiden as well. So I'm also a member of the Citizen Science Lab team here at Leiden University. But I want to tell you today about a number of things that ECSA has been involved with. And for those of you that don't know the European Citizen Science Association, we're primarily a membership association. So this is people interested in citizen science or doing citizen science from across the globe. We're focused on Europe as our association base, but our members are absolutely across the world. And we've got a team within the headquarters that are working on a number of citizen science projects. So we are also very involved in citizen science projects on the ground. These are the citizen science projects that we're involved in at the moment. The DITOS Doing It Together Science project wrapped up about a year ago now. And some of these other projects are starting to head into their final phases. But the EU Citizen Science Project is really our sort of our key landmark project, because the EU Citizen Science Project is a really big consortium. We've got 23 partners representing 12 European countries who are building this platform for sharing knowledge about doing citizen science. So citizen science is a practice. It's a place to profile and tell about citizen science projects, citizen science resources, tools for doing citizen science, training for citizen science as a practice. And citizen science practitioners are not just researchers and scientists and top-down projects. They're also educators using citizen science in the classroom, and DIY citizen science projects that are coming out of local communities, NGOs, even people taking their own initiatives to ask questions about the world around them. So this is really a rich platform for sharing an awful lot of information. And when we embarked at the beginning of this project, we have a number of ways that we're inviting people to share information with the wider community. And here you see an example of our profile form for sharing a citizen science project. And it was really clear from the start, it begs the question, what is a citizen science project? We were going to need to be able to communicate clearly with the community what is considered to be a citizen science project and what is not. And we had a few things that we thought about that right off from the start. First of all, we wanted the platform to represent the full, rich diversity of what citizen science can be, has historically been. You're seeing here an image from a piece of research that was done looking at the Web of Science and all of the publications talking about citizen science and related terms. And you can see how there's different angles into citizen science coming out of volunteer mapping, coming out of public engagement, coming out of science communication. So there's quite a lot of different lenses for understanding what citizen science can be. And similarly, citizen science is being applied in a really wide range of areas of science. This is a recent update to the map of science picture of all of the different areas of science, the social sciences, the humanities. We would include the arts in there as well. But as you can see, anybody doing citizen science with these kinds of starting points are going to have a very different lens on what citizen science exactly is. And our challenge for the EU Citizen Science Platform is to be as inclusive as possible. And I want to share with you a little bit of the sense of dilemma that we face, because of course we went into the literature and so many partners in the project, we had a lot of definitions of our own. If I could ask you to either go on your phone or on on the website of Menti. You can use this link, you can use that QR code, and I'm going to switch around to my own view of Menti. I'm going to ask all of you to tell me, what is your definition of citizen science? It can be a phrase that you use in your own work. It could be the impression that you currently have about it. If you've joined us because you're curious about citizen science, you have a bit of a feeling about what it could be. Please enter bullet points, a sentence, a few words, what your definition of citizen science would be. I'd really love to hear your particular lens, your starting point, the history that you have of citizen science. And hopefully Anna's able to also copy paste that link for us in the Zoom channel so that you have that on Zoom.
Yes, the link is in the chat.
And as you start entering, I'm hoping to see some of these answers scrolling up. So one of the things that we discovered once we started diving into definitions, as soon as you try to create your magic perfect sentence that encompasses as much as you can think of, you actually have ruled something out. I'm seeing these coming through. Do I need to? We're not seeing them. I'm seeing answers come in, but we're not seeing them on the screen. I wonder why not. Let me see if I can solve that while you're answering. There we go. My image was getting in the way. There's lots of definitions coming in, some really rich. Yes, thank you for doing it in Dutch as well. Please feel free to write sentences in Dutch to get the word use that you'd like to get in. Power to the people, that's wonderful. One of my colleagues in the field and actually the lead author on the characteristics work, Muki Hakwe, said something really interesting at a recent conference, that as soon as you're talking about empowering citizens to get involved in scientific research, it means by definition that you yourself have to let go of some of that power. We've got some wonderful references to methodologies, active participation. So already you're seeing that there's a really rich feeling for what kinds of things are encompassed in citizen science. But if we tried to turn this into one magic sentence that encompassed it all, we would just end up with sentence number 16, trying to describe citizen science. So this is the challenge that we faced in the EU CitSci project. See still a few people ticking in. Really lovely definitions. I'll share as many of these as I can afterwards. So coming back to the work that we embarked on, what we wanted to do was come up with some way of describing what citizen science is without setting boundaries that then left something out. So trying to come up with something that was very inclusive. And we started by talking about what are the characteristics of citizen science. So how do we discover this common ground about what makes something citizen science or not? And how do we encourage and support a pluralistic understanding of all the things that citizen science can be? So this was our methodology. We started by looking at the factors that are behind citizen science, and we boiled down nine key factors that are that influence people's way of thinking about citizen science. And I'll show those in a moment. We then developed 50 vignettes to describe each of these in context. So it made it easier to talk about and easier to picture a specific scenario. And then we reached out as widely as we could to get a big diversity of view on these with a survey. And we showed people each of these vignettes, as many as they had the time to look at, in random order, so that we spread it as evenly across the vignettes as we could. And we asked people to grade it from 0%, definitely not citizen science, to 100%, definitely citizen science. But then we also asked, what was your confidence level in giving that answer? Did you feel like, yeah, definitely sure, or no, could you indicate a little bit of uncertainty? Maybe this is a gray area, maybe there's other views. So the factors that we boiled down were the activeness of the participant, the presence of compensation towards the volunteers or the participants, the purpose of the activity itself, and then the purpose of the knowledge production as something separate from that, the level of professionalism of those that were engaged in the activity, the degree of training that was required, how data was shared, what the leadership structure was, top down or bottom up or self-initiated, the specific field of science in which it took place, and the nature of the involvement. And drilling down into each of these factors, we came up with a kind of typology within each of those factors. And you can see an example of some of these here. And we used these as the basis for developing the vignettes. And here you can see we chose a number of sub-factors to highlight, to zoom in on for the designing of the vignettes. And what we tried to do across these total of 9 factors, and then a much larger range of sub-factors, is come up with a mix so that we had in the vignettes covered off most of the factors. So here you see an example. This is vignette number 3, which we've given a nickname subscription fee. They're all written in the case of an individual that's engaged in an activity. There you see the list of sub-factors that we drew on that fed into this particular scenario. And in many cases, these were inspired by existing citizen science initiatives. So this particular one was inspired by a piece of work done in the DTOS project, the Doing It Together project. And across the bottom there, you see the scale that we wanted to be able to reflect in the vignettes as well. So we tried to describe 5 cases that were clearly going to be in the range of definitely not citizen science, 5 vignettes that were definitely going to fall into, yep, that's citizen science, textbook example, and then a range of where the gray territory might be. So we ended up with 50 vignettes in the end. And this is the form that we showed everybody when we asked the survey. We first asked, where on the sliding scale would you place it? We asked what your confidence was in making that call. And we also caught some extra information about what would you have called this activity, and a little bit of background explanation about that rating. So in total, 330 people responded. All of the 50 vignettes were covered by a significant number of people, and we've got another graph that shows quite a surprising long tail. On average, each vignette was covered 10 times. Also got some extra information about what would you have called something's happening there. A little bit of background explanation. And this is the way the responses broke down in terms of the number of people that participated in the survey. So you see that for the most part, we were reaching people out in the research fields. As ECSA as an organization, and also the EU Citizen Science Project, a lot of our friends and family networks are fellow researchers, fellow practitioners, but we really spent a lot of time trying to deliberately reach out to alternate groups as well. So we had a real diversity of views, not just these people that are deeply steeped in citizen science. And then we took the responses and we mapped them. So in the example that I just shared with you now about Jane, that's supporting bird research but is not engaging herself. This was a pretty clear result of most people felt that was not an example of something that's not a citizen science activity. So what I'd like to do with everybody right now is I'd like to have a little bit of engagement with each other to talk about these vignettes and look at these vignettes. And what I've done is I've created a Padlet that has a range of vignettes. I'm going to come out of my slides and I'm going to go over to the Padlet. So if Anne can stick that link for me into the Zoom chat for everybody, set up this Padlet, and we've got one breakout room for each of these vignettes. So as you go into your breakout room, you'll have the title of one of these vignettes in your breakout room. With the people that are there with you, if you just take one moment to read through what that scenario is, what that vignette is, I'd love you to then have a bit of a conversation with each other about where you yourselves would place this on the sliding scale. Do you feel it is close to 0? Is it close to 100%? Definitely citizen science. Do you feel it somewhere in the middle? And can you talk a little bit about your confidence level in saying that this is definitely one way or the other, or maybe a degree of uncertainty? We'll just spend 5 minutes doing that in each of the breakout rooms. And I will come around and try to have a little visit with you all and see how you've understood the task that I'm assigning you to share with each other, and if you have any questions specifically about how to do it. But on this Padlet, you'll see a little plus button underneath each of these columns. And it would be wonderful if everybody could just share a quick thought about whether you feel, yes, this is definitely, you could say yes or no, whether this is definitely citizen science or not, a little bit about your thinking behind it, whether you had some, you discovered some differences of opinion in your breakout sessions. Welcome back to everybody as you stream back. You'll be coming back on mute, but as we're a small number, please feel free to unmute yourselves and have a little chat here until we have everybody back in the session. A survey of 330 people thought about the scenario with the amateur naturalist. And this is something that we experienced almost throughout the entire work. I'll just go back again to that, description. Oops. That description of Sherman, the science writer. So as I stated about our methodology, a number of these we designed to try and cover ones that we thought were clear in the literature as not being citizen science, and ones that were clear in the literature as being citizen science. So we ourselves, in designing these vignettes, already had some ideas in our head. Many of you will wag fingers at us about bias, although we did our best to not present any bias in doing that. But then in our results, we saw that there was really divergent views from the community about the degree of citizen science of any of these vignettes. So quite a large number said, yeah, this is definitely 100% citizen science. But you can see that there's some more gray areas where they felt a little bit less confidence, and actually a number of people that said, definitely this is not citizen science. Similarly with our vignette talking about a massive multiplayer game where there's a bit more of the typical game mechanics, and this is used towards furthering science research. This was the range of views of those that responded to the survey. So once again, most strong on saying 100% citizen science, but quite a big variety of views across the whole spectrum. In the scenario of crowdsourcing, where the data is being collected by an individual, and that's being shared with a global weather forecast forecast company as a commercial service, we actually expected that some people would have an allergy to the commercial aspects of it, and yet for a large part, a lot of people felt, well, yes, this is definitely a citizen science activity. The collecting data that's not shared scenario. So this is an individual that's pursuing their own interest and their own curiosity and has a plan to share that information at some stage, but at the moment it is not shared, was still nonetheless considered by a large number of people to be a citizen science activity. So where we thought that perhaps the data sharing would be the factor that people felt ruled it out, in fact, it was still considered a citizen science activity because the engagement in science. In the mapping vignette, we have somebody that's involved in helping to make a collective map. And this was most strongly seen as a citizen science example, but there's still some cases of people that felt that, no, that doesn't represent citizen science. And then finally the survey. And once again, in the literature, this is something that's often talked about as clearly, it's not citizen science if it's just a survey and there's no further engagement. And yet, there were quite a large number, and you see that reflected in the number that most of the respondents did indeed say that, no, this is not a citizen science activity. And yet that there were a few people that really did feel that it was, because it nonetheless has value towards science. And so from the outcome of all of these vignettes and the survey information that we gathered, you'll remember that in the questions, we also had a field where we asked people to tell us a little bit about their thinking and what they felt about each of these. And from all of that input, we then dove into what the characteristic areas are. So where are people looking at these vignettes and the underlying factors within these vignettes to determine what is a citizen science activity and what is not. And we boiled it down to 5 main characteristic areas. So you've got the core concept of the citizen science project itself. You've got the disciplinary aspects, the leadership and participation aspects, the financial aspects, and the data and knowledge aspects. And those are things that we worked out in greater detail. which we've put here, so that where the outcomes of this work are starting to be shared is here on this Zenodo repository. I'll make a link for this webinar as well, so people have more background materials around the work. So you'll see that there's two main documents. There's the characteristics. So those five, the characteristics which I just described here, these 5 characteristics. In the first document, those are worked out in greater detail. And then there's an explanation notes document that talked about how we came to that boiling down of the five areas. So please do take note of that Zenodo link and have a look at those characteristics. There's a paper that's pending where we describe in much greater detail our entire methodology and the context of the work. And I've been saying we, and it really is a we. So the work was led by Muki Hakle, who's one of the co-chairs of ECSA and is one of the partners within the EU Citizen Science Project. But as you can see, a really large number of people were involved in this work that took place over the entire last year, a number of workshops, the design of the survey, the design of the vignettes, the processing of all of that data, the development of the characteristics, and we continue to work on these and write these. So thank you very much for engaging with those with the vignettes. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and return to the video call with everybody. Now I can see everybody's faces. When I look at my own screen, I don't see you now. I can see you again. And I'd like to take a moment to see if we've got any questions